When Elmer Layton stunned the sports world with his resignation in 1941, the most demanding job in all football stood vacant, but not for long.
Waiting in the wings was the coach of Boston College, 33-year-old Francis William Leahy. Fresh from an unbeaten season that saw his squad win the Lambert Trophy for the best team in the East and score a postseason Sugar Bowl victory over Tennessee.
When Notre Dame called, there was only one thing for Leahy to do. On March 7th, 1941, he took over the biggest job in football, head coach of the Fighting Irish.
But if the job was new, the surroundings were familiar. For Frank was a Notre Dame man. A natural athlete, he might have become one of Rockney's star tackles. But in his senior year, a bad knee injury condemned him to the sidelines with plenty of opportunity to study Rockney, the master.
Rockney would have been proud. Frank Leahy's initial try at Notre Dame sent the Irish driving for their first undefeated season since 1930. And young Frank Leahy was named Coach of the Year.
In 1942, Leahy brought home still another winning team, and the following year, the Irish won its first national championship since the old master, Rockney. Honors were heaped on Notre Dame. Angelo Bertelli won the Heisman Trophy, and Jim White, Creighton Miller, John Yoniker, Pat Philly, all named All-Americans. And now they were calling Leahy the young master.
In 1944 and 45, Frank Leahy served in the Navy, but the teams he had developed continued to win. First under Ed McKeever, who posted an 8-2 winning record, and then again under Hugh DeVore in 45 with 7-1, 2 lost, and 1 tie.
When Leahy came marching home in 1946, Notre Dame captured another national championship, piling up 271 points to 24. The record shows that in 5 out of 9 games, the opposition failed to score at all. But one game ended without a victor.
Notre Dame Army, Yankee Stadium, November 9th, 1946. Army had a 25-game winning streak, and the veteran squad, led by Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis. Notre Dame had Johnny Lujack and Emil Sitko in the backfield, and greats like George Connor, John Mastrangelo, George Strohmeyer on the line. The country was looking forward to what some call the Battle of the Century, but it ended in a scoreless tie.
A veteran reporter summed it up this way. Just what it proved, we don't know. Maybe 2 great unstoppable teams just went out there and proved there was no such thing as an unstoppable team. But who will ever forget Lujack's bone-crushing tackle of Blanchard, the most critical play of that game?
1947 marked another first for Frank Leahy. For the first time in 17 years, for the first time since the heyday of Rockney, Notre Dame went unbeaten and untied. And for the second year in a row, the Irish captured football's national championship.
5 members of the 1947 squad made All-American teams. Bill Fisher, George Connor, Ziggy Zarobski, Leon Hart, just 19 years old, and Johnny Lujack making All-American for the second time and bringing home the Heisman Trophy.
1947 was also the year Army and Notre Dame agreed to end the series, which had begun in 1913 and had grown, they said, too big. The so-called final game was played for the first time at Notre Dame.
It was a record crowd and sentimental gestures by dignitaries from Washington and New York. It was, one reporter wrote, like a couple being divorced and wondering why. Terry Brennan ran back the opening kickoff for 97 yards for a touchdown. Leahy used his reserves in the final period. Somewhere in there, Army scored its only touchdown. The final score, Notre Dame 27, Army 7.
And in 1948, the Fighting Irish won their first 9 games, but a last game tie with Southern California cost Notre Dame their 3rd straight national title.
In 1949, after winning their first 9 games, Notre Dame played their last game of the season against Southern Methodist in Dallas.
The trip to Dallas was a holiday for everybody. With no scouting duties, all of the assistants went along with their wives. Hundreds gathered to see the champions off at Chicago Station. Athletic director Moose Krause was wearing the big white Texas hat given him on a previous trip, and the team took turns wearing it.
At every stop along the way, there were autograph collectors, admiring young girls, worshiping young boys. In Dallas, the morning mass was a sellout, with the devout standing in the aisles. The party of the second part, Southern Methodist, cooperated fully in the illusion that the Irish were a super team. SMU had lost 3 games. Their best back, Doak Walker, had been injured and would not play. They expected to lose by 40 points, they said, but would show up anyway. Later, Coach Leahy summed it up this way.
In the second half, Kyle Rote was almost superhuman. The score was tied at 20-20, and for the first time all fall, we had only a few minutes to prove we were really a championship team. I never saw more excitement in a game. Before a fantastically partisan crowd and against a team that was truly superb, we had to take the kickoff and go on to score. Quarterback Bob Williams had brought the team over to me. Coach, he said, this is it. We're going out there now. Do you have any advice? Yes, Leahy said. I have some very good advice to give. Don't ever enter the coaching profession.
The test of a champion football team comes at the moment of truth. When the stands are riot wild, every man in the lineup must do his job faultlessly, without mistake, without a missed signal, without a missed block, without a fumble. The safest way to go is on the ground, and that's the way Williams took Notre Dame from the kickoff to the touchdown that made it 27-20, a glorious climax of the 4-year victory streak of the Fighting Irish.
Leon Hart won the Heisman and Maxwell trophies. Bob Williams was named United Press Back of the Year. Jim Martin and Emil Sitko were also named All-Americans.
And after that beautiful, unbeaten, untied 1949 season, after 60 victories and 7 winning years, the Irish lost 4, won 4, and tied 1 in 1950. How about that?
Well, Leahy just didn't have the horses that year. The sophomores were nigh on to invisible. Now the chickens had come home to roost in Frank Leahy's office.
1951 brought changes. The Korean War was on. Freshmen were made eligible for varsity competition, and the season was a creditable 7-1, 2 lost, and 1 tied. 1952 brought a repeat with another 7-2-1 record. Again with freshmen now under the benevolent wing of a freshman university president, 35-year-old Theodore M. Hesberg.
1952, the Notre Dame-Oklahoma game had received a tremendous preseason buildup. It was a clash between the two dominant schools and coaches of the period. Oklahoma had Bud Wilkerson and one of the best college backfields of all time. Billy Vessels, Eddie Crowder, Buck McPhail, and Buddy Lee. Oklahoma came up to the November 8th struggle undefeated and shooting for the national championship.
The Notre Dame material with John Latner as the star seemed to be a year away, but was recognized as a dangerous underdog. Neither club could make much headway in the first 12 minutes.
Finally, after a short Notre Dame kick, Oklahoma had the ball on the Notre Dame 27. And in a splendid effort, the Sooners' Billy Vessels took the ball down the sidelines for the first score of the game.
Midway in the second quarter, Notre Dame advanced 60 yards in 9 plays with Ralph Guglielmi passing to Joe Heat for the touchdown.
Minutes later, Oklahoma got that score back as Billy Vessels shot through tackle and ran 62 yards. And the Sooners led 14-7 at the half.
Early in the third period, Notre Dame's John Latner intercepted a pass and ran 23 yards to tie it at 14-14.
Now for the third time, Vessels put Oklahoma ahead with a 44-yard touchdown. Notre Dame received the kickoff and in 13 bruising plays scored on a 79-yard drive to tie it up, 21-21. On the 8th kickoff of the game, Notre Dame's end, Dan Shannon, hit Larry Grigg, the Oklahoma back, with such impact that Grigg turned a half clip in the air and lost the ball.
Play about to resume now. The score is still tied at 21-all. It's Notre Dame's ball, 1st and 10 on the Oklahoma 24-yard line. Notre Dame coming out of the huddle, a straight T formation. Tom Carey at quarterback, Joe Heap at left half, Neil Warden at full, and John Latner at right half. Don Penzer and Art Hunter are the ends. Carey hands off to Latner. It's a quick opener. Latner is through the line. He's down to the 20, the 15, to the 10. And finally he's brought down around the 8-yard line. A 16-yard gain on the play. The tackle was made by Tom Catlin for the Sooners. It's an Irish first down on the Oklahoma 8-yard line. The score is tied 21-all here in the 4th quarter. 1st and goal to go for Notre Dame from the 8-yard line. Notre Dame out of the huddle, a straight T formation again. Notre Dame shifts, and Oklahoma is offside. Oklahoma offside. The referee is pacing off 5 yards, and it's Notre Dame's ball. 1st and goal to go from the 3-yard line. Notre Dame back in the huddle, and now they're coming out quickly. Again, the straight T. Carey hands off to Wharton, and he drives into the center of the line, and he's close to a touchdown. No, it's going to be short as the umpire. The ball is on the 1-foot line. Wharton tried that strong Oklahoma line, and he almost got it. Quickly, they're coming out of the huddle up to the line of scrimmage. The Sooners have everybody waiting for the charge. It's a straight tee again. Carey kicks it on a sneak, and he's hit. Touchdown. Tom Carey took that pass from center and drove over behind a mighty Irish surge for the score.
It didn't matter that the extra point was missed. Notre Dame, coached by Frank Leahy, had won one of its greatest victories, 27-21.
The following year, 1953, Oklahoma opened Notre Dame's season. Now Leahy felt that his material was ready. It was indeed. Notre Dame won 28-21. Victim number 2, Purdue, 37-7. Then it was Proud Pitt's turn to lose, 23-14.
Meanwhile, down at Georgia Tech, Bobby Dodd's Rambling Wrecks were waiting. Tech fans were high on their team, but Leahy's team had been shaping up, and the experts agreed that the Irish now had the dream backfield in Latner, Warden, Heap, and Guglielmi. Dan Shen was on punt patrol, and heading the hard-nosed line was Sammy Palumbo. Georgia Tech kicked off, and Notre Dame marched the ball all the way back for an early 7-0 lead. The Irish moved again, down to the Tech 7, and fumbled. And the Georgia Wrecks began to ramble. But the Irish managed to hold on to their lead, and at halftime the score stood Notre Dame 7, Georgia Tech 0.
The players headed for the dressing rooms. Leahy started the foul, but he never made it. He couldn't make it. His chest was bursting with pain, and he collapsed in the equipment room. An ambulance was called, and Notre Dame's executive vice president, Father Edmund Joyce, gave him the last rites of the church. The halftime pep talk was a prayer that the coach might live.
The battle on the gridiron was resumed, with Georgia Tech tying the score in the third period. By this time, Leahy was in the hospital, but there was no good word to pass on to his players. All they could do now was hope and pray and play and score for Frank Leahy. Down the field went the Irish, passing, punting, blocking, charging to score once, twice, 3 times more before the gun ended the fourth quarter. Final score, Notre Dame 27, Georgia Tech 14.
But sweeter than victory was the news that Frank Leahy would live. Fortunately, the severe pains in Leahy's chest were not heart pains, but he had suffered a severe abdominal spasm. Every time Notre Dame won or lost, Frank Leahy took a beating. His nerves were on edge, as they had been in every one of his 11 seasons. Now the question was, how much more could Frank Leahy take? And the question was no reflection on his courage.
Finally, the doctors announced their verdict. Stay off the bench. With an ailing Frank Leahy looking on from a distance, the Irish took on Navy, Penn, and North Carolina, and beat all 3.
Then Leahy came back to the field for the Iowa game. Hardly a place for a sick man. The pressures that had put Leahy down before were still there, and the best Notre Dame could do was a 14-14 tie. But all in all, there was compensation. Sick or well, Frank Leahy had returned to active duty. He drove his team hard to close out the season with 2 resounding victories, 48-14 over Southern California and 40-14 over Southern Methodist.
Yes, Frank Leahy had done it again. 9 wins, no losses, and 1 tie.
Frank said later that the 1953 squad was his best. John Latner won both the Heisman and Maxwell trophies, and 5 other Notre Dame stars made All-American. Don Penza, Neil Worden, Jim Schrader, Minnie Mavrades, and Art Hunter. But it was also Leahy's last team. His natural tension plus the corrosive pressures of the game had combined to threaten his life.
His doctors gave him just one option: give up coaching or give up living. The coach chose life. After 11 amazing years, Francis William Leahy resigned, closing the record books with 87 victories, 11 losses, and 9 ties. Next to Rockne, Leahy was the winningest coach Notre Dame ever had.
The university administration did not have to search far to find Leahy's successor. He was already on the campus. Terrence Patrick Brennan. Handsome, intelligent, and personable Terry Brennan had played halfback for Frank Leahy.
At the tender age of 25, with just 1 year as freshman coach under Leahy behind him, Terry Brennan was given command of the Fighting Irish.
For 2 years, Brennan produced winning teams, turning in 9 victories over 1 defeat in 1954, and scoring a respectable 8 victories over 2 defeats in 1955, as Paul Horning, Don Schaefer, Pat Basiglia, Ralph Guglielmi, and Frank Verricchioni were named All-Americans.
has ever been coined in English or Irish to describe the year 1956. The year that saw 2 Irish victories and 8 defeats. But Paul Hornung still managed to make All-American for the second time and win the Heisman Trophy.
And little did the Irish know that 1956 was just the beginning of an 8-year period of penance. Penance, some said, for excessive Irish pride.
In 1957, insult followed injury after winning 4 in a row the previous year seemed just a bad dream. But then the nightmare returned. With a 20-6 loss to Navy, 34-6 defeat by Michigan State. And coming up were Bud Wilkinson's Sooners of Oklahoma.
In the first period, the Irish had to make more goal line stands than Father Sorn back in the early days.
In the second period, the men of Notre Dame broke free but couldn't score. In the third period, the Sooners resumed the attack but couldn't cross the Irish goal line. Then, in the fourth quarter, with the score 0-0, the Irish began their march.
The score is still 0-0. First down and goal to go for the Irish on the Oklahoma 8-yard line as the Sooners dig in to stop them. Notre Dame has been stopped twice so far this afternoon inside of pay dirt. It's 1st and 8 to go at the 8-yard line. Notre Dame comes out of the huddle. It's a tight T formation with Williams calling the plays. Reynolds at left half, Petrosani at fullback, Lynch at right half. The give is to Petrosani. He's into the center of the line. He's picking up yardage. He's finally stopped just over the 5-yard line. Umpiring now, the ball is placed on the 4-yard line. The center of the Oklahoma line, Northcutt, Fisher, and Harrison combined to make the stop. It's 2nd down and 4 yards to go. Notre Dame back in the tight team. The ball is to Lynch, who hits the center of the line. It doesn't look as though he got anything at all. Again, that strong Oklahoma line has answered the question. It's 3rd and 4. Notre Dame back in the huddle again. Now they're coming out. A straight team. It's Williams on a keeper play, banging the center of the line. But he doesn't get very far. Just about a yard as the team's umpire. Again, Northcutt and Fisher made the stop. Now it's 4th down and 3 to go as Oklahoma digs in. Notre Dame out of the huddle. Williams takes the ball. And the quick toss to Dick Lynch, who's going around right in. And he's over for the touchdown. A touchdown for Notre Dame. And the Notre Dame Looters are setting up a stone.
Monty Stickles added the extra point, and Notre Dame had achieved the unbelievable. A 7-0 victory over mighty Oklahoma. It was Terry Brennan's greatest victory, handing Budwood their first loss in 4 years. Oklahoma had won 47 in a row and had not been shut out in 123 games.
The great victory over Oklahoma was not the only shining moment in the season. For 1957 was the year that Notre Dame resumed its classic series with Army. Notre Dame won 23-21. Final tally for 1957, 7 wins, 3 losses. 1958 brought 6 wins and 4 losses. And 1959 brought a new coach to Notre Dame.
Joseph Lawrence Kaharick was the name. South Bend boy and a graduate of the Notre Dame class of 1938, Joe the Pro, they called him. He played first-string guard under Elmer Layton. Now, with 20 years of college and professional football behind him, Joe gave up his job as head coach of the Washington Redskins, where he had been voted Pro Coach of the Year, to come back home and retrieve the failing fortunes of Notre Dame.
But Lady Luck failed to smile on the Irish. Over the next 4 seasons, victory eluded them on 23 disheartening occasions, thereby limiting the Irish to 17 victory celebrations from 1959 through 62.
In the spring of 1963, when Joe Kaharick returned to the pros, Hugh DeVore, the Irish freshman coach, took over as head coach. Mr. Old Reliable of Notre Dame, Huey was a Notre Dame first-string end under Hunk Anderson, and he'd run the team for 1 season while Frank Leahy served in World War II. Now DeVore was back at the helm, and his team handed a thumping upset to Southern California. But then that bubble burst with 5 straight defeats. And 1963 went down in the record books with 2 wins and 7 losses for the Fighting Irish.
But infinitely more important on the campus that year was the dedication of one of the largest and certainly the most striking libraries in the world. Some call it Ted's Mahal, but the students call it Mount Excellence. Does Notre Dame win them all? Not always, of course. But in 39 seasons, from Anderson in 1931 to Parsegan in 1969, Irish teams have marched off the field victorious 264 times, while losing 93 and tying 19. But there's one story about Notre Dame that remains to be told. It's the story of a man who gave new meaning to all football. A man who died at age 43 at the crest of his life's wave. His name was Rodney.